The blister on my right palm opened again this morning. Third time this week. Same spot, the base of the thumb where the axe handle turns on the downstroke. I've been splitting firewood for 7 months, and the callus still won't form properly. The skin thickens, hardens, and then the cold cracks it open overnight, and I'm back to square one. I wrapped it with a strip of cotton from an old undershirt and kept going because the stove doesn't care about my hands. 18 logs minimum. That's what it takes to keep a single room above freezing when it's -27 outside and the walls are 60-year-old pine that has given up on insulation. I used to restructure divisions of 3,000 people. I ran 11 restructurings across 7 countries in 35 years. I was considered one of the best in the industry at it. And I cannot make a callus stay on my hand. My name is Henrik Lindqvist. Henrik Axel Lindqvist from Norrköping, Sweden, an industrial city in Östergötland that most Swedes drive through on the way to somewhere else. Stendal Industrial Group. Precision tooling and industrial automation. 14,000 employees globally when I left. I joined in 1989 as a process engineer on the plant floor in Norrköping. I left in 2024 as managing director of EMEA operations. 3,400 employees, $2.1 billion in revenue, offices in Geneva, Stockholm, Munich, Milan. I'm telling you this because the numbers still come first. That's how I was trained to think. Head count, revenue line, operating margin. Before I tell you what the weather is doing or whether I slept, I will tell you the numbers. The number that matters now is 1 room, 5 by 6 meters, 1 cast iron stove, 1 shelf, 1 window facing the lake. A restructuring isn't destruction. That's what people never understand. You're optimizing. You identify the redundancies. You consolidate the functions. You relocate the assets to where they'll generate the most value. The language is precise because the work requires precision. You don't fire people. You redeploy. You don't close a plant. You consolidate operations. You present the business case to the board with a timeline, a savings projection, and a stakeholder communication plan. And if you've done it right, the whole thing executes like machinery. I ran 11 of them in 35 years. I was very good at it. The Sao Paulo restructuring in 1993. That was my first. I was 34, youngest plant manager in company history. Facility losing $8 million a year. I delivered a plan that reduced headcount by 30%. Clean, efficient, done by October. Ingrid came with me to Sao Paulo. Of course she came. That's what happened. I received the posting and we went. Eric was 3. Astrid was newborn. Ingrid packed the apartment in Norrköping in 11 days. I know it was 11 because I was already in Sao Paulo when she finished, and she told me on the phone. I said, "That's efficient." She said, "It wasn't efficiency, Henrik, it was survival." I didn't understand what she meant. I filed it as a comment from someone under relocation stress and moved on. In hindsight, and I've had 7 months of Siberian silence to develop hindsight, that was the first time she told me exactly what was happening, and I processed it as a data point instead of a signal. That was the posting. 8 postings in 35 years. Norrköping, Sao Paulo, Shanghai, Dubai, London, Moscow, Geneva, Stockholm. Each one lasted between 3 and 5 years. Each one began with a business case and ended with a new business case that required me somewhere else. The children attended 14 different schools across 6 countries. I know this because Ingrid kept a list. Not for administrative purposes, she kept it in the journal, the one on the shelf above the stove that I'm going to talk about eventually, but not yet. Eric learned Portuguese before he learned Swedish properly. Astrid spoke Mandarin with a Shanghai accent at age 9 and had to unlearn it in Dubai. Lena was born in London and has never lived in Sweden for longer than 18 months. My youngest daughter speaks English as her first language and her father's native language as a second, and I presented this at dinner parties as an asset. She's adaptable, I'd say. She's globally mobile. I used HR language to describe my own child. Ingrid smiled at those dinners. She was extraordinary at dinners. She could hold a conversation with the spouse of any country manager in any language she'd learned, and she learned them one after another: French, Portuguese, Mandarin, Arabic, each time from zero, because that's what you do when you land in a country where you know no one, and your husband is in the office 14 hours a day, and the children need a doctor and a school and a grocery store, and someone has to find all of it. She found all of it, every time. The Shanghai posting was the one that made my career, 2001 to 2006. I took the facility from a $12 million loss to a $47 million profit. They called me the Swede who fixed China internally. I received it as a performance metric. Ingrid learned Mandarin. She found schools, doctors, a network of expatriate mothers who met on Wednesdays. She made a garden on the balcony, herbs, things she could cook with. When the Geneva posting came, she dismantled the garden, left the pots with the building caretaker, said goodbye to the Wednesday mothers, packed the apartment in 9 days. That was the posting. The EMEA restructuring from Geneva, 2012 to 2016. 23 plants consolidated into 14. 1,800 workers relocated across 7 countries, 0 lawsuits. The board cited it as a benchmark. Ingrid had a friend in Geneva, Fatima, Moroccan, married to someone at the UN. They had coffee on Tuesdays. When I say friend, I mean the kind of relationship where they spoke honestly to each other, which is something Ingrid did with other women and something I have never done with anyone. When we left for Stockholm, Ingrid said goodbye to Fatima at the airport and cried. I was on a phone call. I restructured my family every 3 to 5 years. New city, new school, new language. I called it opportunity. Ingrid called it survival. The children called it Tuesday. I presented each move the way I'd present to the board. Growth narrative, upside potential, transition support. I built the business case for each relocation and I delivered it to Ingrid over dinner. And she listened. And she asked practical questions about housing and schooling and health insurance, because she had learned long ago that the decision was already made, and the practical questions were the only ones I could answer. I never once filed an impact assessment on my own household. That is, I want to be precise about this, that is the sentence I am most ashamed of. Ingrid was 64 when she died, pancreatic cancer. 7 weeks from diagnosis to death. February 2024, Stockholm. I was in London for a quarterly review when she called with the news. She didn't call me first. She called our children, all 3, in their respective time zones, Singapore, Toronto, Melbourne. Then she called me. I took the next flight back. She died before the next quarterly review. This is the part I don't know how to tell without the numbers. After the funeral, I went back to the apartment on Strandvägen. Ingrid had decorated it with things from every posting: a ceramic bowl from Sao Paulo, silk from Shanghai, a Moroccan lamp from Fatima. The apartment was a museum of everywhere we'd been, curated by the person who had actually been there. I sat in it for 6 months, 3-4 hours of sleep a night, lost 13 kilos. I didn't eat because the kitchen was the room where Ingrid called the children for dinner, in whichever language matched the current posting, and I could hear her voice in there so clearly that I checked the room twice one night at 3 in the morning. I found her phone, 654 unread WhatsApp messages, friends in 6 countries, women I had never heard of, a network that spanned 2 decades and 4 continents. She had built an entire world. I had not known it existed. September 2024. Clearing Ingrid's home office. The desk was a small wooden table she'd bought in London. Antique, she said, though I suspect it was just old. On the desk, a reading lamp, a cup of pens, a pair of glasses she hadn't worn because the prescription was from 2019 and she'd never updated it, and the journal. Leather-bound moleskin, purchased in Sao Paulo, 1993, the year of the first posting. I opened it expecting, I don't know what I expected, shopping lists, addresses, the practical information of a woman who moved across continents. 8 entries. 8 entries over 31 years, 1 for each posting. Each entry began with the same sentence: "We're moving again." Each entry ended with what she left behind. Sao Paulo, the garden on the balcony, the herbs she could cook with. Shanghai, the Wednesday mothers, the Mandarin she'd finally gotten comfortable in. Dubai, a neighbor named Fatima. No, that was Geneva. Dubai was a friend whose name she wrote and I cannot read because her handwriting shakes at that point, and I don't know if it's emotion or the pen. London, a book club that met on Tuesdays. Moscow, her sense of direction. She wrote that she lost her sense of direction in Moscow and never recovered it. Geneva, herself. The last entry, Geneva, 2016. 2 paragraphs. I don't know where I'm from anymore. Henrik doesn't notice. The children don't ask. I think I became the suitcase. I became the suitcase. That sentence is on the shelf above the stove right now. The journal, spine facing out. I put it there in October when I arrived, and I haven't opened it since. I don't need to open it. I know every word. The journal sits above the stove and below the window, and the frost makes patterns on the glass most mornings that look like something geological, branching, crystalline, patient. The frost doesn't restructure. It just forms. I came to Baikal because Gennady, a retired fisherman, 74, from Bolshoye Golustnoye village, had posted on an expatriate forum that he had a dacha available for rent, €600 a month, log cabin, single room, wood stove, outhouse, well water. I didn't choose Siberia. I chose the listing that required the fewest decisions. The lake is 636 kilometers long, deepest on Earth. The water is so clear you can see 40 meters down. In winter, the ice is turquoise and cracked in geometric patterns that look like the organizational charts I used to draw on whiteboards. Except these were made by pressure and temperature over 25 million years, and mine were made by a Swede with a marker trying to optimize a head count. I split firewood at dawn, haul water from the well twice a day, walk the shoreline, 7-kilometer loop, same route. In spring, the ice on Baikal fractures. The sound is, I want to find the right word for this, and I'm not sure the right word exists in any of the languages I've worked in. It's deep, tonal, geological, like a cathedral organ played by something that has no interest in the congregation. The ice speaks to no one. Nobody expects an answer. I find that restful. The children are in Singapore, Toronto, and Melbourne. Eric is 41. He works in supply chain management for a logistics company. He calls on Sundays when I walk to the village cafe for the signal. He asks how I am. I tell him the weather. He tells me his weather. We are two men reporting conditions. Astrid is 38. She's a translator, 6 languages, a skill she acquired by being moved to a new country every time she'd mastered the previous one. She writes long emails. She doesn't ask me to come back. Lena is 34. She's a marine biologist in Melbourne. She was the one who cried at Ingrid's funeral. Cried in a way that I observed from a position I can only describe as managerial. I watched my daughter grieve the way I would have watched a plant closure from the 7th floor in Geneva, with empathy, with concern, from behind glass. I know how this sounds. A wealthy European man in a cabin complaining about his choices. I've sat through enough restructuring town halls to know that the person at the podium is never the one who lost the most. Gennady comes by twice a week. He brings fish sometimes, omul from the lake, smoked over birch. He sits on the step outside the dacha and drinks tea from a thermos and talks in Russian that I understand about 40% of. He doesn't adjust his pace for me. He doesn't simplify. He talks the way the lake sounds, steady, indifferent to whether I'm following. He asked me yesterday how long I'm staying. I said I didn't know. He looked at me for a while. Then he said, and I understood this clearly, every word, "That's the first honest thing you've told me." He might be right. Out here, nothing restructures. The birch trees have been in the same place for 200 years. The lake has been here for 25 million. Gennady's family has fished this shore for 4 generations. I'm the only thing that ever moved. And I still don't know how to stay. The journal is on the shelf, spine out. I know what it says. I just can't hear her say it. The stove is low. The frost is forming on the window. Dawn is coming in grey over Baikal the way it comes in grey every morning, without agenda, without a timeline, without a stakeholder communication plan. Ingrid, the children, the 35 years, that was the posting.